Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe if you communicate better, you live better. Today, we're talking about a really fun topic that you and I talk about a lot, Lucy, is leadership development, but also how do you build a culture that works for everybody? I know DEI is a weird word nowadays in this culture, but the principle's still the same. How do you have people belong? How do you help people feel like they can bring their best self to work, regardless of any identity they have? Right? You want them to do well. People want to do well. People want to feel like they can do what they're doing. So today I'm excited because I was reviewing her resume and looking at her and talking to her, and I'm just impressed by the amount of work that she's done and the experiences she's had. We're joined today by Dr. Tenia Davis. She's worked at Harvard Business Review. She's worked at iManage, Johnson Publishing Company, HARPO, and she's currently the Chief People Officer over at the University of Chicago, the NORC. So, Dr. Tenia Davis, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's HBR Consulting.
HBR Consulting.
Yep, HBR Consulting. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm happy to be here and look forward to the conversation. Also a passion of mine to talk about, how to help leaders do things differently and better and create happy, or I shouldn't say happy, but good company culture. And then tackle that one thing that everyone hates, which is communication, feedback, conversation. What is it? Especially in a heightened climate like this. Yeah, this is the stuff. This is my jam. This is what I love to talk about.
Yeah, this is our jam too. You have a book that came out in August around feedback, and we'll link it in the show notes. But we've done multiple episodes on how to give feedback up, down, sideways, all over the place, just because people keep asking about this topic.
Right.
But before we really dive into it, I think the people would really love to hear, how did you get to where you're at? How did your journey end up hitting so many cool spots?
Yeah, I can't say that I had this long strategy. I did not. But what I will say is that I've always been open to learn and have always been able to tap into other superpowers to learn. I'm always looking for how can I do it better, always soliciting feedback, being open to that feedback and open to opportunities. At one company I worked for early in my career, one of the leaders used to refer to me as, the the dumping table, because I would just take everything no one wanted to do, right? And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'll learn it. I don't know. I'll try it. However, I must say, that allowed me to really kind of move in a different trajectory than most HR professionals at that time. There were business aspects of the company that typically HR people were not at the table that I was invited to. And I just soaked it in. So that's really where I started. And that was probably the best of it. I had a really good mentor at the time. I think mentorship is so important. Someone that really helps you understand the lay of the land, the unspoken rules is so critical. And her name was Judy Samuels, by the way. I think she's amazing at that time.
Shout out.
Shout out. She was amazing and, very no nonsense, but, this is how things are. This is how you should look at it and, be open to learn, be open to hear the feedback. She really gave some really good wisdom that I use today. And throughout my journey, that has taken me to the next step where I've had supervisors that when they moved, they said, hey, come with me. And, a lot of that was relationship. It was, of course, delivering in the work, and really helped me land in some wonderful places. Another leader that I have so much respect for, Tim Bennett, who was the president at HARPO. It's really where I learned a lot about servant leadership. And that's really, what my research was around servant leaders. But I just learned a lot about being a servant leader without having the title. I never heard him say I'm a servant leader. I never heard him say that. However, his actions were just really, I was just really struck by the authenticity, the commitment, the integrity, and I learned a lot from him. So in short, I would say just being open. I'm always, it's always curious to me when I hear people say that's not in my job description. And I'm like, what does that even mean, really? Right. And so
Mm,
if you really want to learn and grow in the workplace today, it's taking on some of those things, there's challenges, right? And stretching yourself. And really tapping into, do I really know this as well as I think I do? Is there a better way of doing it? And tapping into individuals that can really help you kind of, understand what a career trajectory might be at that organization.
that's awesome. And as you grew and as you started taking in these lessons, what were some of those growing pains that you realized once you became a leader and you started leading, you were like, well, this isn't as easy as I thought it would be. Like there's these difficult things I have to manage.
Oh, I've had so many. Okay, well, I know we only have an hour, but I'm still learning. I want to say I'm still learning, right?
Sure.
I think communication is just so key to really understand, expectations, finding common ground. I think is so important. I think one of the biggest lessons is really understanding assumptions and perceptions. And I always say those two will always take you down the wrong road. And so that would be one. And then two, balancing out empathy. I have a big heart and sometimes, there's a time to have empathy and then, there's a time to not have as much empathy depending on the situation. And being an HR practitioner, we often make decisions that really impact folks' lives. And so I'm always careful in how I make decisions. Um, and making and ensuring that I have all the details and
Mm,
understand the full gamut of the situation. So I don't react emotionally. I've seen individuals have emotional responses um, and it's really not in the best interest of the organization or for the individuals that were part of it. So, um, I work hard at having a balance and and really understanding the dynamics of the situation and the problems that I'm solving. I think that's
mm,
just really critical, especially today. Learning that early on, I think has really prepared me for today. Um, and understanding that, everyone brings different dynamics into the workplace, right? So wherever you are in your community, that's not checked at the corporate doors, it goes into the corporate door, right?
mm,
And so how do you help folks find common ground? There are people that have never lived by anybody else like me, or so when you come into the workplace, I'm always curious when people say, "Oh, really? You speak so well. Really?
mm.
Why wouldn't I speak well?
Yeah.
I got enough
Yeah.
degrees. You would think I would speak well, right?" And so, it's just and a lot of times I don't think there's anything harsh behind that. However, because of the climate we're in, it just comes out stronger. I remember someone once said to me, my daughter was applying for different schools and she was receiving letters and a coworker of mine said, wow, does she play sports? And no,
Mm,
let's start with maybe she's smart. So, but again, it's knowing
yeah.
how to respond in situations. Again, communication, I think in heightened situations like that, either people stop or it magnifies and then people make assumptions, they have perceptions and all these
Yeah.
things. And I think those are things that get in the way of people really building authentic, working relationships. So um,
Mm,
I always try to find what is that common ground. And I think we have more in common than we do not, right? Whether,
yeah.
both, lived in California at one point in time, raising kids. I can tell you stories there, or caring for our parents, or whatever that might be, the humanity side of who we are. And I think we've lost
Mm,
touch of that. And I think we're missing opportunities to connect.
mm. So many different cool areas I want to explore. And I'm sure Lucy, I know
Oh, yeah.
from what I know about you, you're like want to dive into a bunch of these things. Let's start with this. Is there a specific situation where you remember like you weren't able to manage your emotions really well and you're like, I got to get this under control because this is not going to help out in the long run.
What comes to mind is early in my career. I'm an old lady, but early in my career, I remember my first DEI training. And this organization, when DEI was just first, coming into play. And there was an exercise. And the exercise was that they showed all the different ethnic groups and they said, okay, we want you to write whatever word comes to mind for each group. Mm-hmm. And now keep in mind, I've worked side by side with folks for a very long time. And the words, I think it was the first time that I had like an emotion to something that I just really couldn't describe at that time, because the words that were labeled with African American were so horrible that I was trying to reconcile, where would these words come from? I don't understand this, right? And the words for the other groups were really nice. And the training at that time did not have the skill sets to know how to recover from something like that. It just left the room silent. And I think people, as I step back and watch, people were really getting excited writing down all these words. And the descriptions, I definitely did not think described me or people I knew that looked like me. And that was hard, because you're working side by side with these people that you now see have an impression of people that look like you, maybe not you, or maybe you know what I mean? And so it was, and then I had to have a conversation about it. It was just the craziest thing. And so, I had to quickly gather my thoughts, and I was so early in my career. I didn't want to offend anyone, but I was very offended and didn't really know how to articulate something that I was seeing. And it was definitely a learning moment for me. And it taught me how to present a balanced view of something and show the humanity in what I understood without offending, but also showing that you can articulate something without offending. And that's what I learned in that moment. And, that's more of an art. I later learned more of an art, because it's so easy to react, right? It's so easy to yell and just go off the rails, right? That's not wisdom. And those are the things that are harder to recover from, because as Dr. Angelou says, people they remember how you make them feel, right?
Yeah.
And it also says a lot about the person. There's always the recovery of benefit of the doubt and having empathy for folks. But it is a very hard place to navigate when, at that time, what I was experiencing, when you're showing up every day just to prove that you belong there every day, not because of color of your skin, but because of the intellect that you bring to the table. That is hard to navigate sometimes.
Absolutely. And kudos to you for even this turning it into a learning opportunity. And I see your openness to learning and resilience, because that's not easy to be in an environment where we see people have these beliefs about us or the group that we are part of. Or
Right.
I've had some people commenting about my accent or my European background. I've had many clients that are not feeling included in their company. They're feeling not supported by their manager for whatever reason. And so a lot of clients are struggling. A lot of people are struggling with that.
Yeah. One of the best, there was a gentleman that I met along the way, and I always, so I'm one of these people, don't laugh. I'm so geekish. You're probably going to laugh. It's like, I can't believe she said that. But I literally keep a binder. I know we have technology, but I still use my binder. I read an article about someone, or, I see someone on the news, and I find them fascinating. I put them in my binder. It's like, I got to meet these people.
Oh, that's nice.
And so I'm always searching, and I'm curious, and I want to learn from the best of the best, or I want to learn from those that have, that lion heart, right? And there was a gentleman that I came across. His name is Calvin Terrell. And I found him to be extremely gifted in what he does. And so he teaches, which I think is in a very smart way, from from high school to adults on how to find common ground. And I think he has done it the smartest way. And I was very impressed with his approach. And Calvin does it from a place that I have not seen before, and very artful to help people laugh at themselves, but also be educated and have an understanding of why people are the way they are and the uniqueness that they bring to the table. And I think that's important, right? How do we, help people bring the uniqueness that they have, right? That's how you get innovation. That's creativity. That's, you want that in your organization, right? And yet not feel like, they're a unicorn and don't fit in. Because someone might feel uncomfortable because they have not taken the time to learn about, different people. So, you mentioned DEI, and I know it's such a touchy topic, and a lot of people don't believe in it. And, I always go back and just say the simplest thing, just treat people the way that you want to be treated, right? Provide opportunities for everyone. It doesn't matter if they have red hair, blue hair, whatever, right? Everyone wants to belong in where they spend their time, right?
Yeah.
And as leaders, I do think that is our responsibility to create an environment where everyone can show up and contribute and give their best and do their best work, right?
That's right.
And it shouldn't matter what the complexion of their skin or, where, they grew up or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's really about the character of the person, right? So, I hope we can get to that place. I think we bring out the best in each other, and we also can bring out the best, in ourselves, right? But that is, that's something that I think we have to continue to work at.
I love that. I have around self-leadership, bringing the best in ourselves. And it sounds like you're displaying a beautiful signs of the self-leadership, the emotional regulation, even when somebody says whatever they say, staying calm under the pressure.
Yeah.
What would you say are some things that have helped you in that self-leadership, in that bringing the best in yourself?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, I've been yelled at, I mean, I've seen some very interesting things where you just walk away saying, wow, that was just wow. And I can say from my true experiences, I literally want a good outcome, and a good outcome would not mean a reaction. Right. And so I just hit pause in the moment. I've been in that seat. I hit pause, I listen, and then I take a break and say, this is where we, need to kind of take a break here. And then really try to understand what was behind that reaction and that emotion, right? Because no one wants to be in that seat. And what I found is that and it's interesting, not everybody has control over their emotions. And so as a leader, I would never want that to be my defining moment. And that I know for sure. And so, I really work hard at trying to understand behavior in the workplace. And I do have empathy. And sometimes you learn, and I posted this on my Instagram, so it's interesting you asked this question. I think in moments like that, you learn what to do and what not to do. And in a situation like that, it just solidified. I would never want anyone to experience what I experienced. And, how do you help leaders manage emotions differently to have good outcomes? I mean, we all get upset. We all get, but I do think as leaders, there is a higher expectation of us. And how we show up to that really says who we really are, right? And so I rather take it as a learning moment, not respond to it, because then I miss the opportunity, and then there are other missed opportunities, right? And sometimes people don't recover from, what tends to happen, what I've seen and what I've experienced, out of that comes charged emotions. Some of it is perception, some of it is truth, and some of it is just whatever insecurities are bubbled up. And it's hard for people to recover from some of that stuff, right? So it's better to try to diffuse it. And when it calms down, understand, okay, how do we find common ground? And once you delayer it, there is always common ground if you choose to want to have it. And so, someone once told me, someone has to be the adult in the room. Someone has to be and you're going to always have moments to say, man, I should have done that differently. I've had so many of those. I would not want an emotional collision to be one of them, right? Because I think those are the hardest things for people to recover for some, and I think that's where resilience comes into play as well, right? To say, look, this is not who this person is. This was a moment that maybe they managed and they could have managed differently. Maybe there's a way that I can walk them through it so that we can have better interaction, better communication, and then come up with some sort of agreement to where if this emotion starts to percolate again, how do we resolve it, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I've always said to folks as well, if you're in a situation like that and a person, and that's why my book on feedback, I expanded the construct of constructive feedback, because without self-awareness and without reflection, a person really can't grow, right? So I can give you feedback, right? But if there's no self-awareness around that conversation, right? And there's no reflection, then you really can't correct what you don't own, right? And so I've seen phenomenal leaders, do phenomenal things, and great leaders do great things. And what I've observed is that they had this ability to self-reflect in their own space and own their stuff, right? And really work on, I'm really going to try to do that differently and better, because I do want to show up differently, and I do want to be that leader that they're expecting me to be, or they envision for this organization. I want to be that leader. And it does take a lot of work. Self-reflection is hard. That's hard, right?
Yeah. Takes energy. Yep.
It takes energy. It really does. And self-awareness, self-awareness is hard. You'll be surprised. A lot of people don't have self-awareness. It's easy to say.
Not surprised at all.
It's easy to say, it's you. Okay. But is in any of that conversation, is any of it you? And so, it's hard. And I realize that. And so, I try to create a space where people can have the dialogue and we can disagree. I think in our climate, disagreement is always contentious and is always a battle, and it should not be. But it is, right? And, I think we have to kind of get back to the art of conversation, communication, and how to have disagreement. It's okay, right? The sky is blue. No, it's purple. No, it's red. It must be red. Well, okay, can it be all three? I don't know. But, how do we get to that common place where people feel heard, respected, and valued?
Your research and your work and your life is thinking about servant leadership. And I wonder, because I think a lot of people, or I've run into a lot of people that misinterpret what that means. They just see the word and they just assume. They haven't really read into like what it means and how to use it, how to think about it. They just think it means like essentially being a pushover. Let me just do everything for you. Like, how do you think about that? And how do you balance that with the need for that clear communication and allowing disagreements? So how do you be a servant leader, but also be assertive and say, I need to also tell you what's going on in this way?
Yeah. Servant leadership is not soft, right? It's not soft. Being a servant leader is all about thinking about what's good for the group, right? How do I lead a group? Think about their career. How do I connect with them authentically? How do I, connect in and really build momentum and connect to the organization and, have results, right? Servant leadership is all about results. It's how you get to the result, right? And how do you treat the people getting there, right? And do I listen? And do I have empathy, right? Do I authentically connect? How do I help them feel like they belong, right? And so these are not soft, they're actions that involve a lot of empathy, emotion, right? Because everybody comes with different things.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you. People struggle with servant. Should it be service? Service or servant. I do think the name, needs a little bit of a rethinking. However, I think the description remains the same. How you treat people, right? And how you show up for the people that you lead and work with, right? Do I take the time to really understand how Chris wants to grow? Am I helping him with a career plan? Am I giving him feedback, right? Am I taking the time to really get to know Chris, right? How about coffee, lunch? I really want to know how you learn, how you grow, right? That's a different style of leading. But I think it's one that is most effective in the workplace today, right? We have a lot of generations at work today with different needs, right? I don't want to generalize, age groups, generations, but there are just different needs in the workplace. But what I've seen more than ever, people are focused on their wellness. They're focused on wanting to feel safe, psychological safety, and the leadership style that aligns with that is one that would be described as a servant or a service leader. I've seen those leadership styles be more effective. And through my journey in my career so far, I've seen some leadership styles very destructive. And I've seen others that are very effective, right? And so it just really depends on the organization and where they place their value. But what we've seen over the past couple of years is people check out. There's like, I just can't do this anymore, right? And so I think organizations will continue to pay attention to, how do you support, the employees' well-being? How do you drive for performance? How do you communicate? How do you create an ecosystem of safety? Those are all very important aspects that company culture should be evaluating. Because you can have someone sit in a seat and be an employee, but are they giving you 60%, 80%, or 110%, right?
Right.
So if you're going to pay a salary, you at least want to make sure you get at least 90-something%, right?
Sure.
And so, how do you mobilize talent? How do you engage talent? And how do you cultivate talent? You must have good leadership.
I'm interested because a lot of times when people think about that servant leadership or service leadership, it's really like that one-on-one relationship. How do you help leaders of larger teams or just multi-dispersed teams or large organizations think about how they can create that culture of that?
Yeah. And so, I always say start with where your superpowers are, right? Every leader is different. And I truly believe everybody has a superpower. I really do. Right. And so what is it that leader brings to the group dynamics? Right. And so start there because that's where they're going to shine. And if they're not as comfortable with connecting, then start with what they are most comfortable with and then help them look at the dynamics of their team. And how do you draw their superpowers, per se, into that group and start looking at individually, how is that person contributing to the overall? Collectively, how do they contribute, right? And when you start building small wins, people become more engaged and then they feel, wow, you really do care about me, right? But what is that right win? And how are you recognizing the talent on the team, right? You might have someone that's very good at project management, but not good at follow-up, or they might be good at, communication, but horrible with organization. I don't know, right? So start with where they're good. You want to recognize the value that they bring naturally. And then what other skill set is needed for that group, that's where you want to kind of have a plan and work with them. Hey, I'm in this with you, right? I'm actually really good at organization, so I'm going to help you. And here's some things that I've done. It might not work for you, but let's try to find that right style that you can easily adapt to, right? To complement this other part of the work that you do. When people see that you're taking the time to do that, to really help them get better, then they tend to engage differently versus where I've seen some leaders, they just criticize, oh, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, oh, you didn't do this, oh, or what's even worse, I call it a roller coaster, where they criticize all around the person except directly give the person feedback, right? Yeah. And that's the worst, right? And that's poor leadership. But and I've seen that. So you do want to help that leader have the communication chops to have the right conversation for each person. Some people you can talk to directly, right? Like some people just want, okay, just give me the 1, 2, 3. I don't need all that other stuff. Don't say good morning. Don't say hi. No, I don't want coffee. Just tell me what I got to do. Right. And so you got to know who you're talking to. Or someone, they might want you to ask, well, how was your evening? How are your kids? How's your family? Okay, those are good questions to ask. So one is not right and one is not wrong, right? However, as a leader, what I try to do is help them identify, okay, what is the complexity of your team, so that you know how to engage with each. You can't take the same approach to each person. It doesn't work. I mean, our environment is just too complex now. But how do you do that? But also in a way that is natural for that leader based on their style, right? So you're not saying, hey, you got to change all these things. I think that's the worst thing to do. No, take what they're really good at. Recognize that. Like you're really good at driving performance. Okay, so now we got to get this team to get to performance. How do we do that, right? Where's the strength of the team, right? Chris is awesome in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great. So maybe you have him as a pseudo mentor for the group, for members of the team that need to work on organization skills. So you also leverage the talent you have within your team. As a leader, you don't have to do it all, right? So you have smart people, empower them. And if it's also a learning moment for them in their leadership development, then guide them through it, right? So leverage the members of your team so that they are growing as well as a leader, as you are developing, the team. So it's really taking time to understand the dynamics, the strength, and most importantly, these are all, I know some people say, oh, these are all soft things, but what about the business? Of course, you focus on the business first, but when you align people to the mission of the organization and what is a strategic plan, you align people to that, of course, so that people know what they're working towards, right? But you have to understand the dynamics of the people that you're working with to get there, for people to even hear you, right? To connect those dots. But it's very important to connect the dots to what are we really here for, right? What are we trying to accomplish? And then when you have those small wins, recognize them. Hey, we did it. Okay, now we got 6 more months to go. Let's do it, right? But you get them excited and they start seeing progress, right? And you can, and even if you have a lot of feedback for the group, if you recognize and acknowledge the progress, it's easier to hear the feedback, right? Because they feel you're in it with them, right?
Yeah. Have you ever, one of my favorite activities sometimes when I've facilitated team dynamics and team development is I'll do an assessment, right? DISC, strengths finder, doesn't really matter, but I'll then separate them into groups based upon their style, and I'll give them all the same assignment. Write an email to the rest of the organization requesting help on this topic.
Yeah.
And then they have to see how the other groups write that same email. And it's always interesting. And it's always like an eye opener for them. Like, why did they emphasize this versus this? Why did they write it structured this way? And it's a really good conversation starter to show like, these are how the way people are on your own team are thinking and needing and their strengths, and how can you better meet each other's needs?
Yeah, absolutely. And how you signal that, right? It's interesting. I was talking to, I mean, this is some time back, but it always resonates because I always keep it in mind. But I remember I was talking to an employee, why don't you ever speak up in meetings? I was in a meeting. I was like, you're always quiet, are you connecting with the team? And he said, yeah, I'm connecting. He said, I just don't feel that, I'm really adding value. I mean, he just wasn't connected. I said, why would you say that? I said, why? I heard your presentation was great. And he said, because my supervisor always says how he would do it. I would do it this way. I would do it this way. I would do it that way. And so when you say that, it automatically discounts what that person might bring to the table. So, I think there's always that caution too, to ask the question, well, hey, walk me through how you got here. Walk me through your thought process. Acknowledge what the person has done, and then walk them through, well, here are different ways to think about this, right? And when you say there's different ways to think about it, you're inviting them into the conversation, but you're also acknowledging what they contribute or can contribute, right? So, a lot of it is in the communication. And, I always say, as my new generation reminds me, the old way of thinking, it just doesn't resonate, with the larger body of the workforce. If we're going to teach them, they want to feel that they're heard. And if we're going to teach them, they need to respect our voice. They typically don't respect if we don't respect them.
I remember this quote, just real fast. I remember this quote, people won't care what you think until they think you care.
Right. Exactly. And there will be times where, as leaders, you just have to say, look, we're doing it this way and this is why we're doing it. Of course, you're going to have those moments, but engaging in the workforce today is a little different. The art of communication is even more so, and organizations be very careful with what behaviors they give a pass to and what behaviors they choose to manage. That sends a strong signal. Employees watch. They really pay attention. Either they will sit there and do the bare minimum, or they will sit there and be engaged, or they will sit there until they're ready to move on. And if an organization doesn't really understand the pulse of their environment, so when things happen, it's too late. It's too late. It's really important. Yeah. Or if an organization only tells you what you want to hear, that's always a danger, right? As we all know.
One thing that's coming up for me is I'm seeing your strength as empathy, one of your many strengths. And it seems like your technique or way, finding the common ground. I've heard you say that multiple times as one of the strategies, and having empathy for others. And really seeing things from different perspectives and what really matters here. Now, for many leaders, they got to the leadership position because their strengths was on the other spectrum of getting things done. I just need to suck it up and get it done. And that's what it is about the results. It's not about the people. I'm not that strong in the people stuff. So let's just continue doing, get it done. And they should suck it up too. So they shouldn't complain. There are leaders like that their strength is not empathy and they actually struggle with empathy. What would be your advice to them? How could they get better? Let's say they are already convinced, yes, I know the empathy thing, I should get better, but they should still suck it up. They drive me crazy with their emotions. What would you tell a leader who is struggling with this part?
Well, first of all, there's no wrong or right. And, in some environments, you need leaders like that. And so it is appropriate to have that leadership style. It just really depends on, the work environment, the culture, the task, the project, because that leadership is also very effective, right? And so I don't want to take from that. And it might be what is needed in that scenario. Now, if you take that same leader who has done extremely well and been able to move up based on their technical chops, and the empathy side wasn't such a heavy focus, and then they move into another company where the empathy has a higher premium, then that's where the adjustment takes place, right? Because in some cultures, it's part of the culture. And yeah, you just got to get it done. And this is how you do it. And it works. And so there's nothing wrong with that, right? If that same leader moves to another company, there's a higher premium on the socialization and the empathy side, which they had not encountered, then that's where there's a learning opportunity, right? And so that's where, they're building trust, the team is building trust, and it's really understanding the lay of the land and the language of the organization. And it's more so understanding the language of the organization. How do they get work done? Is it 90% based on technical chops, or is it based on 60 technical, 40 of the empathy? How does the culture get the work out the door? And understand that part first. Then understand, okay, what is the language? Because you got to use the same language to connect with folks, right? and then look at how do you connect in with the team. So it's a little different exercise, but if you walk in with the technical chops, typically, people want to know that you can do the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they want to know that they can learn from you, and they want to know that you can deliver, right? So you checked all those things. It then becomes a question of how we get it done, right? How do we get it out the door, right? So it's through the people. Okay, so let me assess the people that I have, right? Let me look at the technical skills, and then let me look at how this group connects. Well, if it's a group that needs to connect socially or, emotionally first, then that's where the leader has to figure, okay, let me see where I'm comfortable with that, right? Because if you've never had to do it, I have such a big heart for leaders because it's a hard job. Historically, we didn't have to have all these different dynamics to our leadership style. We just had our little strategy plan saying end of year, you got to hit these numbers, right?
Yep.
That's it. Now, today it's a little different, and so if they have a mixture of a team, some might need to have a good morning, hello, and some might want to feel you care about them. And then there are those that don't want you to know anything about them. Let me just do the work. But you got to know which one is which, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you can get the best out of that group and drive for performance. But start
What
with get the best
okay.
get the best out of your team based, on their strengths, and build out from there.
Yeah. What are your favorite tools, questions, strategies to assess an organizational culture?
So I'm a little critical here, Chris. I know there are a lot of tools out there. I don't think there's one tool for every environment. I think it really depends on the culture. I would never advise a feedback tool on a culture that is not used to or comfortable with feedback, right? Because it tends to be weaponized, right? Or, I wouldn't, if a company has never gone through an assessment, I'm slower to roll something out. You go through change management, you have to really help people understand the benefit of that tool. So I think there are a lot of good tools out there. It's really understanding the company culture and their appetite for using these different tools, and how will they be used, and how will you measure? And you have to also ensure that it doesn't isolate people out, because I think sometimes what happens with a lot of these tools is that people get, put in buckets. Oh, I'm an ENTJ. Oh, you're one of those people.
Yeah.
You're an I, oh, you're one of those people. I heard about you. And so people are then, because there's these stereotypes that are attached based on these labels that get in the way of people really learning and developing. So I don't have one particular tool that I'm a fan of. There are many tools that I use depending on the organization and depending on where the organization is mature-wise, and then also whatever the appetite is, right? And then, what time frame do I have to roll something out? That has a lot to do with it too. And then, am I educating the leaders and the staff, or am I only educating staff? I mean, it's a heavy lift when it's the entire organization. I think it's really important, and I know a lot of consultants are probably like cringing right now, but I don't like a one-stop shop. It puts a Band-Aid, but it doesn't always solve. At least I haven't seen it. And I think there are a lot of good tools out there. Some tools are combined together, honestly. But there are, and I'm always curious about a lot of tools, and then there's some I'm just like scratching my head, like, how did they sell this? But because it really did not help the organization. So anyway, I think there are a lot of good tools out there, Chris. I don't have one in particular that I'm just like, oh my God, this one is the answer. I don't think there's one that is the answer. I think you mentioned Strength Finders. I do like Strength Finders, and I've used Strength Finders. I do like it. And there are other tools out there as well. It really depends on, the culture and how and what has already been in place. It's like I hate to use this example as the 360. That's like the deadliest way to give feedback sometimes to an environment that doesn't give feedback. So everybody waits for that moment. I'm going to write it down on that piece of paper and everything that I feel. And then, the person gets the fee, and it's without context, and they're like, what? And then, the consulting firm made all this money, and you're left with people with more questions than answers. So I think it's important to really understand the pulse of the organization, and to really understand what is it that we're solving for? What is it that the organization wants to get out of this, and how will they use it moving forward? right? And, what is the long-term plan and such? Are we developing the leaders, the staff? What are we solving for, giving feedback? Is it a performance-based organization? What are we really solving for? And what are we hoping to get out of it? But there are a lot of good tools out there. And by the way, I have nothing against 360s. I've seen them work. I don't want anybody sending me emails. I've seen them work extremely well in organizations that had good change management, that had a good training component. How do you give the feedback? It's so important to train people on
That's
how
right.
to give the feedback. And where I've seen organizations really miss it is not training people on how, right? And then when you receive it, how was that? If an organization, I was in one organization, it was the first time they ever did it, and they shared the results with everyone. It was like, wow, you just left that person wide open, no opportunity to really gain trust and learn. It was just, right? And then I've seen other organizations do it extremely well, right? Where there was a very methodical approach in training and education around it. And it was a very good experience for that organization. So, tools like that, I would say, just really make sure it's the right tool for your organization.
Yeah. At my last role, the CEO wanted 360s for anybody that was supervising people. And I pushed back because what she really wanted was just like a printout, like everybody just filling out stuff, and then everybody gets like a personalized document. And I talked through and I pushed back and said, that's not going to be effective. That's just a piece of paper.
Right.
And so we didn't go through with it. But looking back, I think she was just trying to tick off a box of activities.
Right.
Of like, let's just do this and let's just do this. And then hopefully it'll work in the ether somewhere.
Yeah. And it doesn't tend to work that way. Right. And then, you do want your leaders to walk away with, what am I supposed to learn from this? If you're trying to create a learning and a culture environment, you do want to make sure there is, especially if you're going to hold them accountable to it, their staff is relying on that, right? You're asking them to give feedback on their boss, right? And so they want to know that there's some sort of care and respect and accountability around the feedback that they provide, if they all have been, in a healthy way of doing it, right? Because I've seen it weaponized as well. And then the leader gets all this feedback and I'm like, okay, I just did not know people feel this way. Well, that leads to other questions, right? And so I think all I'm saying is that as practitioners, we should be responsible in how we, introduce tools out in an organization. There's a responsibility there. Of the practitioners,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you're talking about, just making me think, like, also, like, we tried the compromise. We said, we'll use a tool, whatever tool you're interested in, we'll use that. We'll just have our team also debrief like every result with the manager so they can put it into action, right? That was the one part that she just could not get over. She just did not want anybody to debrief it with that person.
So why do it?
I don't understand it. I don't understand the purpose.
So you now have that leader kind of out in left field, and what tends to in a unhealthy environment, it then creates like paranoia. Well, who said this? Who said that? And why did they say it? And what am I supposed? So that's not good. And even in a healthy environment, that leader is left with, well, how do I develop? If they're really wanting to develop their skills, right? And so, in both scenarios, there's a disservice there to the individual and to the organization.
Yeah. Tenia, sometimes people just skip through the entire episode and just come to the last 10 minutes for some unknown reason. If they did, let's say somebody just came into the last 10 minutes, what would you say are like the top 1 or 2 takeaways that they should hear from this episode?
I would say we have to get back to, the beauty of humanity. And if you are leading in any capacity, look at common ground, right? There are many things that divide us, many things. I would like to see a shift, and I challenge leaders to look at how they can connect in with their teams in an authentic, productive, belonging way. That's not a soft skill. That's not mushy. It's really, if we do it well, we drive to performance, right? The other is the benefit of the doubt. People say it a lot, but it's really hard to put into motion, I think, for benefit of the doubt, right? No one is exempt from it. Everybody has biases. Everybody has perceptions. And assumptions and all those things. But I think if you start with benefit of the doubt, it opens the door to a conversation, right? So I would say start there, right? And then, the third, I think, is just, personal, be reflective, right? Self-awareness is just so important today. But take a moment and be reflective. What do you do well? Celebrate that. What are some opportunities to learn and grow? And also celebrate that, right? But, really take the moment to look at how you can show up in the world differently. I think that for everyone, for all of us, so that we can contribute something better.
I love that. And everybody should listen to the rest of the episode so that you hear about why all those things are really cool. Where can the people follow you? Where can all the people that are suddenly super interested in your work and hearing about you, where can they find you? Where can they find your book? How can they reach you?
Oh, okay. Well, I am on Instagram. At first, I have to say I resisted Instagram, but I am really loving Instagram. It's like my way of talking to, whoever wants to listen. And so, I sit down on Saturdays and I'm like, oh, what do I want to say? What do I feel? And so, I'm on Instagram. I feel like I'm talking to myself, but it's really cool when I receive DMs like, I really needed to see this today or read this today. And then I'm like, wow, that made me feel good. So yeah, I'm on Instagram, and my books are on Amazon, and I think they're on Barnes and Noble too, but they're definitely on Amazon. And I have a website, I blog. So I love my blog. It's another way for me to talk to myself. And so I have a blog on my website, and that's theleadershipwise.com. And I made it really complex. And Instagram is The Leadership Wise. So it's all the same. And then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. So when people do reach out, I answer questions. And, I always take questions for anyone that want to show up and be a better leader.
Beautiful.
Love that.
I would like to celebrate our opportunity to have you here.
Thank you.
As a very wise, empathetic guest. Really thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, love this conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.